I want you to close your eyes just for a moment. Just a moment. And I want you to take a breath. Not the shallow kind you've been taking all day as you rush from one obligation to the next. As you scroll through your phone, checking to see if the world has changed while you weren't looking. No, I mean a real breath. A breath that goes all the way down into the basement of your lungs. And a breath that reminds every single cell right now, in this moment, you're alive. Now keep your eyes closed a little longer and ask yourself this question. When was the last time you truly relaxed? Not collapsed on the couch after a 12-hour day, not scrolled yourself, eyes burned into a stupor and your brain went numb, but genuinely, consciously, completely relaxed. When was the last time you let your nervous system unwind so fully that your body forgot what it felt like to be on guard? Most of us, to be completely honest, can't remember. And that's not a personal failure. It's just a product of the world that we've been conditioned to live in. A world that rewards urgency and penalises stillness. A world that has convinced us that if we are not striving, pushing, fighting, grinding, then we're falling behind. But I want to tell you something today that might just change everything, and I need you to hear it. Not just with your ears, but with the deepest part of your understanding. I need it to land somewhere inside you that logic cannot immediately dismiss. The most powerful thing you can do to change your life is to stop forcing it to change. Let that land. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, but Mark, I've got goals, I have dreams, I have things I need to accomplish. And I'm not telling you to abandon them, and I'm not telling you to be passive. I'm not asking you to sit in a chair and wait for the universe to deliver pizza from Sunshooters. What I'm telling you is that the mechanism by which your greatest desires will find their way into your life is not through white-knuckled, cortisol-drenched, teeth-clenching effort that most of us mistake for ambition. The mechanism is something far more elegant and far more ancient and far more powerful than anything that, our analytical, survival-based, conditioned mind has ever been taught. The mechanism is surrender, and I can tell you what, last week was a hell of a week, and on Monday of this week, I surrendered. The mechanism is trust. The mechanism is conscious, deliberate, deeply practiced art of relaxing and allowing. Now, let me explain exactly what I mean by that, because these words relax, allow, surrender, they've been so misused in our culture that they've almost lost their meaning. We associate relaxation with weakness. We associate allowing with passivity. We associate surrender with defeat. And the moment I use those words, the analytical mind starts building a case against them. It says that wishful thinking, that's for people who don't have real problems. That's a luxury I can't afford. The analytical mind is very good at building cases. It's the world's greatest prosecutor, and it will prosecute your dreams before they ever get a chance to take the stand. So let's go deeper than the analytical mind just for a moment. Let's go into the science, because I've spent decades trying to work this out. What the science reveals is extraordinary. Your nervous system operates in two primary modes. You have the sympathetic nervous system, and the one most of you and I are running on right now, the fight or flight system. The threat response system. When this system is activated, your body is in survival mode. Blood moves away from your vital organs and into your limbs so you can fight or run. Stress hormones flood. Your bloodstream, your immune function decreases. Your digestion slows down. Your reproductive system goes offline. And most critically, for all our purposes today, our brain narrows. It literally narrows. It's a field of perception, because when a tiger is chasing you, you don't need to contemplate the nature of the universe. You need to find a tree and climb. Survival consciousness is extraordinarily focused, but it is focused on what is wrong and what is threatening and what could go wrong next. And in that state, you literally cannot perceive the opportunities, the synchronicities, the coincidences, the connections that could lead you towards everything that you want. Then there is the parasympathetic nervous system, what we sometimes call rest and digest, or tend and befriend. When this system is active, Your body begins to heal, blood returns to your organs, digestion resumes, the immune system's turned back on, and your brain opens. It literally expands. Its field of perception begins to operate in a state of coherence rather than chaos. And in that state, you can see what was always there, but what stress was hiding from you. You can feel impulses and intuitions. That survival mode was too loud to let through. You can connect to an intelligence that operates beyond the five senses. An intelligence that I would argue is the very creative force of the universe. And here's the crucial point. Here's what I need you to truly understand. You cannot be in both states at once. You cannot be in survival and creation simultaneously. You cannot grip something tightly and expect new things to flow into hand. It's clenching. The state of force, the state of flow are neurologically, biologically, thermodynamically incompatible. You have to choose. In every single moment, and every single day, with every thought you think and every feeling you feel, you are making that choice, consciously or unconsciously. Most people are making it unconsciously. They wake up in the morning and before their eyes are even open, mind has already sprinted ahead into the future that looks exactly like the past, and it's cataloguing every problem, every anxiety, every unresolved tension, every fear, and by the time they get out of bed, they're already in full survival mode. And they wonder why their life keeps producing the same results. They wonder why the same patterns keep showing up. They wonder why the relationships look similar. They wonder why the financial struggles persist, why the health challenges continue. And I tell them, your outer world is a reflection of your inner state. It has to be. It cannot be otherwise, because what you broadcast, what you radiate, the frequency, the level of energy and frequency is what really responds to. Not what you wish for, not what you think you deserve, not what you beg for, not what you actually feel deep in the body is a signal you are sending to the quantum field. And the quantum field is a mirror that reflects that signal back to us. Circumstances, as events, as experiences. So if you're broadcasting fear and anxiety, you're going to attract things to be afraid of. If you're broadcasting lack, you're going to attract conditions of deficiency. If you're broadcasting urgency and desperation, you're going to attract situations that require urgent and desperate responses. This is not punishment, this is the universe being cruel. This is physics, it's how it works. And the moment you truly understand this, not intellectually, not as a concept, but as a lived reality, the moment you feel it in your body as truth, everything changes. Because then you realise that the work is not out there, the work is in here. The work is not about grinding harder in the external work. The work is about transforming your internal state so that you radiate change. And when you radiate change, your reality has no choice but to change along with it. It must, because reality is not fixed and solid. The way your conditioned mind believes it to be. At the quantum level, reality is a field of infinite possibility. It's not a predetermined track that you are locked onto. It's a vast, open, responsive field of potential and collapses into specific experiences based on the observer. You're the observer. Your state of being is the observation, and the observation determines the outcome. Now, I know some of you are sitting there thinking, oh, I've heard this before. I've tried to think positively. I've tried to visualise. I've tried to firm my way to abundance, and it didn't work. I read The Secret. I listened to Anthony Robbins. And I want to address that directly because you're right. Simply thinking positive thoughts without changing your underlying state is not enough. In fact, it can actually create more internal conflict because your body, which has been running a program of anxiety or lack or unworthiness for 20, 30, 40 years, does not believe the positive thought. And the body always wins that argument. The subconscious mind, and the subconscious mind runs 95% of your behaviour, your perceptions, your reactions, and therefore your life. If you want to change your life, you have to change the program running in the subconscious. You do not change that program through analytical mind alone. You change it through the body, through emotion, through repetition, in an elevated state. And here's the key that most people miss. through relaxation. Let me explain why. Relaxation is the gateway. Your brain has different operating frequency, different brainwave states. When you're fully alert and analytical, your brain is operating in beta waves, specifically high beta. When you're stressed or anxious, high beta is a frequency of survival. It's a frequency of conditioned personality. It's a frequency where our identity is most defended and most rigid. It is a frequency where changes are most difficult. When you relax, your brain begins to slow down. It moves from beta into alpha. Alpha is a bridge between the conscious and the subconscious. It's the frequency of daydreaming, of relaxed awareness, of creativity. And when you go deeper, still into theta, you are at the threshold of the subconscious mind. Theta is where deep programming lives. It's where children operate for the first 7 years of life, absorbing everything around them as truth, recording it directly into their subconscious without a filter. It's also when you access it intentionally as an adult, where the deepest reprogramming can occur, when new beliefs can be installed, not through intellectual repetition, but through felt, embodied, emotionally charged experience. And how do you get from high beta to theta? Relax. That's the pathway. Relaxation is not a luxury. Relaxation is a technology, and it is the doorway to the operating system of your life. When you learn to slow the brain waves intentionally through meditation, through breath, through focused body awareness, you become able to access and rewrite the programs that have been running your life from the shadows. But here's where it gets even more interesting, and I want you to really stay with me just for a little bit longer, because this is where most people's understanding stops. And what comes next is where the magic begins. Most people, myself included, even those who meditate, every day I do it, who understand the importance of relaxation, stop at clearing stress. They use the meditation practice as a way to decompress, to manage anxiety, to feel a little better. It's valuable, genuinely valuable. But it's not the whole picture, because relaxation is not just a doorway to clearing, it's a doorway to creating. And when you enter that open, receptive alpha theta state, you are not just making space, you're becoming available to a field of intelligence that's so vast, so creative, and so precise in its orchestration that your analytical mind could never replicate the working in 1,000 years. Think about that. The most important breakthroughs in life, think about the most significant moments of insight, of connection, of opportunity. I'd be willing to bet that the majority of them did not happen when you were furiously working at your desk. They happened in the shower. They happened on a walk in nature. They happened in that suspended moment between sleep and waking. They happened when you stopped trying to figure it out and just let go, because in that moment of letting go, you stepped out of the way. You stopped blocking the signal and the static of your own mental noise, and something far larger than your individual mind was able to come through. That's something, call it the unidentified field, call it high intelligence, call it the quantum field, call it divine, operates according to logic that transcends linear cause and effect. It can connect a person you've never met to an opportunity you've never imagined, through a series of events that your analytical mind would never have predicted or planned. It can resolve a health challenge through a mechanism that medical science has not yet catalogued. It can bring resources, ideas and relationships and circumstances into your life with the speed and precision that appears from the outside to be miraculous. And it is miraculous. It's happened to me. But it's a miracle that operates according to the law, and the law of coherence, the law of energy, the law of resonance. The law requires your participation, not your frantic, anxious, controlling participation, but your coherent, open, trusting, allowing participation. This is what I mean when I say relax and allow. I'm talking about entering a state of such profound trust, such deep inner space, such complete alignment between your mind, your body and your thoughts and your feelings, your conscious intentions and your subconscious beliefs, that the field can work through you without obstruction. I'm talking about becoming, as I often say, a clear vessel, not an empty full of that energy of what you want, full of the emotions that would naturally arise if what you desired were already true, full of gratitude and the wonder and the joy of a person who is already received and completely and utterly unshakably relaxed about when and the how. The last part is where most people fall apart. They can get excited about the vision. They can feel the feelings. They can do the meditation. But then the day passes and the manifestation hasn't arrived, and the analytical mind starts its prosecution again. See, it's not working. See, you're fooling yourself. See, people like you don't get things like that. The moment that voice wins, they contract back into survival, back into trying to force, back into the state that makes what they want and possibly receive. And they can't figure out why the cycle keeps repeating. The cycle repeats because they have not yet learned the deepest teachings of the entire body of the work. The manifestation is not the goal. The state is the goal. The becoming is the goal. When you can maintain an elevated, coherent, open, allowing state, not because your manifestation has arrived, but simply because you have chosen to live here, because you have decided that this is who you are and how you operate. This is when everything shifts. That is when the field begins to respond with consistency and frequency that starts to look to anyone watching from the outside like one miracle after another. And I've felt this. I've watched people heal diseases that their doctors told them were incurable. Bipolar disorder. I've watched people attract financial resources beyond anything they ever experienced in timelines that defied every logical expectation. I've watched marriages restored, estranged children returned, profound purposes discovered, creative gifts, effort alone, a fundamental shift in state. I've sat in rooms with thousands of people around the world who came in broken, hopeless, medicated, resigned. And I've watched them find their way back to themselves, back to the truth of what they are. And invariably, the breakthrough comes not in the moment of the greatest effort, but in the moment of the greatest release or defeat. Now let's talk about what it actually feels like to practice this, because I don't want to leave you with beautiful concepts and no pathway. The pathway is a practice, and the practice begins with the body. Every morning before your analytical mind gets its hands on the day, before the emails, the notifications, the obligations flood in, you've got a window, just a little one. No precious window where the veil between the conscious and the subconscious is still thin. In that window, in those first minutes after waking, when the brainwaves are still slow, you have access to the operating system. And what you do in that window matters enormously. In that window, before anything else, you begin with the body. You scan it, not with judgment, not with criticism, but with awareness. You notice where the tension is living. You notice where muscles are already bracing for a day that hasn't happened yet. And then consciously and deliberately, you breathe into those places. You allow them to soften. You send them the message that the threat has passed. Because for most of us, the threat is not real. It is imagined. It is a memory of the past projected onto the canvas of the future. Fear, anxiety, it's not real. The body doesn't know the difference between a real danger and a vividly imagined one. It responds to both with the same chemistry. So when you breathe and relax and consciously signal safety to your nervous system, you're literally changing the chemistry of your body. You're shifting from cortisol and adrenaline to serotonin and oxytocin, and the construction from expansion from survival to creation. And in that expanded state, you begin to feel, not think. You bring your awareness to what you want, not what you lack, not as something you need because your current circumstances are insufficient, but as something that already exists in the field of possibility, as something that, in some sense, is already real. You practice the feelings that accompany that reality, the gratitude of having received it, the joy of living inside it, the wholeness of being the person for whom the experience is normal. You let those feelings become the dominant chemistry of your body. You marinate in them. You let them recalibrate every system in your body, your heart rate, your hormones, your immune function, your epigenetics, all of it responds to the emotional state you cultivate. And then this is the part that takes real practice, real maturity and real trust. You let go of the outcome. You release any attachment to when and how. Not because you don't care. Not because the desire is gone. but because you understand that the field knows what you want, has received your broadcast, and is already moving to deliver it. Your job, your only remaining job, is to stay in that state, to maintain that coherence, to keep showing up as the person who already has it, who already lives there, and to trust deeply, bodily, completely trust that what is aligned with what that state must find its way to you, because that is the law. That is not wishful thinking. It's physics. I want to speak now specifically about the impossible because that's the world I know. That's the world that I've lived in. And I've chosen deliberately because I know what you're holding. I know that some of you have visited me for clarity mapping and conscious systems, that you have almost given up. Something that the people around you, the practical, well-meaning, loving people around you have gently or not so gently encouraged you to let go of. Not the dream of it, but the expectation of it. The belief that it could actually happen for you in this lifetime, in this body, in these circumstances. Maybe it's a health condition. Maybe it's an addiction that has been deemed chronic, permanent, irreversible. Maybe it's a financial reality so entrenched that even imagining its opposite feels delusional. Maybe it's a relationship with a person, with a purpose, with your own sense of self that has been so damaged for so long that restoration seems impossible. Maybe it's a creative dream that was dismissed so many times in your formative years that you learned to dismiss it before anyone else could. Maybe you don't even let yourself name it anymore, because naming it feels dangerous, because hope at some point stopped feeling safe. I understand, and I want you to know, the very thing that resets most impossible is not a sign that it cannot be. It is a sign that it lives in a frequency range that your current state cannot yet access. The gap between where you are and what you want is not a gap in the external world. It's a gap in the frequency. It's a gap in your consciousness. And consciousness is the one thing in the universe that you have absolute authority over. Not your circumstances, not your other people's behaviours, not the economy, not the diagnosis, bipolar disorder, or the history, being sacked, divorced, bankrupt, or your state of being. That's yours completely and irrevocably yours. And when you close that gap, when you lift your state to the frequency of what you want, rather than remaining anchored to the frequency of what has been the external world, must rearrange itself to match. This is not a metaphor. At the quantum level, matter follows consciousness. The observer affects the observed. Your state of being is not a passenger in your life. It's a driver. And the moment you take the wheel, not by forcing and controlling, but by consciously, deliberately, lovingly choosing your internal state, the trajectory of your life begins to change. I want to tell you something about the quantum field that might help you understand why relaxation is so essential to assessing the impossible. In classical physics, the world operates in a predictable linear cause and effect fashion. A leads to B, leads to C. The analytical mind operates according to this model. It plans, it strategizes, it tries to engineer a pathway from where you are to where you want to be, using only the resources, the relationships, and the knowledge that already exists in the world. And sometimes that works for ordinary goals, ordinary timelines, ordinary outcomes. The analytical mind's engineering can get you there, but the impossible things that have no logical pathway from here to there, those cannot be reached through linear planning. By definition, if you could see the path from where you are to the impossible thing, it wouldn't be impossible. The impossible requires a different mechanism, requires the non-linear, non-logical, non-local, synchronistic orchestration of the quantum field. It requires what mystics throughout history have called grace, the arrival of what is needed from sources through channels that were not and could not have been anticipated. The quantum field operates not in the logical, sequential time of the analytical mind, but what we might call the internal present, a domain where all possibilities exist simultaneously, and where the one that collapses into your reality is determined by your state of observation. Your state always comes back to your state. And your state, the genuine body-based, emotionally coherent state, not the performed or focused or intellectually constructed state, is most accessible in relaxation. When the mind goes quiet, the body releases the grip. When the analytical mind steps into ceaselessness and you come into expanded space, that order, that reality, that's the place where things collapse. It can dissolve physical conditions. It can produce financial shifts that have no rational explanation. It can bring people and resources and opportunity into your life through chains of connection so intricate and so perfect that your only one possible response is wonder, and wonder, genuinely open-hearted wonder itself, one of the most powerful states you can inhabit, because wonder is the opposite of knowing. The analytical mind thinks it knows how long things take, it knows what's possible for someone with your background, your age, your history, your income level. It knows the statistics, it knows the odds, and everything. It knows it's based entirely on the past, on accumulated data from what has already happened. But the quantum field doesn't constrain what has already happened. It contains every possibility that has not yet happened, and to access those possibilities, you have to be willing to not only know, you have to be willing to release the death grip of certainty and enter the open, receptive, trusting space of genuine not knowing. This is why the ego resists so fiercely, because the ego's survival depends on knowing. The ego is a manager of the known self, the identity constructed from past experience, past conditioning, past trauma and triumphs. And the moment you start genuinely opening to the unknown, the ego feels existentially threatened. It will throw every weapon in its arsenal at you. It will generate doubt. It will generate fear. It will generate practical objections and rational arguments. The voices of every person who ever told you to be realistic. And all of this, every bit of this resistance is actually a signal that you are on the right track, because the impossible lives beyond the unknown. The ego only guards the threshold of the known, because it knows that on the other side of that threshold is a version of you that it cannot control. The version of you that exists beyond the ego's control is who you actually are. It's the self that existed before the conditioning, before the wounding, before the label, before the learned helplessness, before the accumulated evidence of limitation. It is the self is continuous with the intelligence that beats your heart without your instruction, that grew you from cells into the extraordinary human complexity that you are right now. It heals a cut. You have a dream while you sleep. That intelligence, that operating in you right now, beneath and beyond all your thinking, is not limited by history. It's not constrained by your diagnosis. It's not intimidated by your circumstances. It knows that a level of intelligence your analytical mind will never comprehend exactly what you need, exactly what you're capable of, and exactly what is possible for you. Your job, your only job, is to get out of its way, to relax into it, and to trust it so completely that the barrier between your individual self and that vast creative intelligence becomes permeable, thin, eventually transparent. And in that transparency, in that union between the individual and the universal, the impossible becomes not only possible but inevitable. Let me give you a practical framework for understanding the relationship between your effort and your allowing. Because this is where people get confused. They hear relax and allow, and they interpret as do nothing, and then nothing changes. And then they conclude that teaching doesn't work. But that is a misunderstanding. The teaching is not to do nothing. The teaching is be transformed and then act from that transformation. The effort is not absent, it's redirected. Instead of effort in the external world driven by fear and lack, you put your effort into maintaining your internal state, and instead of grinding harder at things that aren't working, you invest your energy in meditation and visualization and elevated emotion. You make that your primary occupation. You treat it as seriously and as consistently as any job. And then from that coherent state, you take inspired action. Not forced action, not anxious action. Now, I have to make something happen or everything will fall apart action. Inspired action, the kind of action that arises spontaneously from a coherent state that feels aligned and natural and right. This is informed by the intelligence greater than your own strategic planning. Inspired action is qualitatively different from forced action. It tends to be more efficient, more creative, more perfectly timed, tends to produce results that are disproportionate to the effort involved, and it feels different in the body. It feels like expansion rather than contraction, like enthusiasm rather than dread, like following a current rather than swimming against one. When you feel inspired, action arising, act decisively and completely. But between those moments of inspired action, your practice is the allowing of the maintenance of the state, the unwavering bodily embodiment of emotion-based conviction of what you want is on its way. Now, I want to address something that I see consistently in the people who struggle most with this teaching, and it's a question of worthiness. Because deep in the operating system of so many extraordinary people who are intelligent and capable and genuinely seeking, there's a program that says they're not worthy of the exceptional. That what they want is for other people. People who are more gifted, more attractive, more educated, more connected, more deserving. And this program doesn't usually announce itself directly. It's sneaky. It shows up as procrastination. It shows up as self-sabotage. It shows up as the inability to fully believe in when the intellectual understanding is there. It shows up as a subtle, almost unconscious contraction that occurs every time a breakthrough gets close. And I want to speak to that program directly. It's a lie. It's a program installed in you by people and experiences that had no business making permanent decisions about your worth. Your worthiness is not earned. It's not conditional. It does not depend on your productivity or your appearance or your history or your mistakes. It is inherent. It is the nature of consciousness itself to be worthy of experience. Your consciousness, you're the creative force of this universe, having a human experience. And the only thing standing between you and the full expansion of what is possible through you is a set of beliefs, a set of electromagnetic patterns in your brain that can be changed. Not eventually, not after years of therapy, though therapy has its place. But in an instant of genuine, felt, embodied recognition, the recognition that you were enough, that you have always been enough, that the universe does not operate according to a reward system that distributes miracles to the deserving and withholds them from the unworthy, the field is impartial. It responds to frequency, not to merit it. It does not care about your past. It cannot see your past. It only sees your current signal. And if your current signal is unworthiness, that is what will be amplified back to you. But if you can shift your signal, even for a moment, even imperfectly, if you can find inside yourself a frequency of genuine self-recognition, of belonging, of righteousness, the field will amplify that instead, and you will begin to have experiences that confirm it. This is why inner work is the most important work. This is why changing your state is more powerful than changing your strategy, because strategy operates within the paradigm of your current signal. It can optimize within the existing frequency, but it cannot take you to a frequency that is fundamentally different. Only you can do that. Only the intimate, courageous, sustained practice of meeting yourself where you are and choosing to feel differently can do that. And here's what gives me profound hope after everything I've been through and observed. The human nervous system is plastic. It changes. It was designed to change. Every time you think a new thought and feel a new feeling, you're laying down new neural pathways. Every time you reinforce these thoughts and feelings through repetition, those pathways become stronger and the old ones weaker. The brain doesn't distinguish between vividly imagined experience and a real one. Both produce the same neural firing. This means that when you practice in your meditation, in your visualization, in your elevated states, feeling the feelings of the life you want to live, you're literally constructing the neural architecture of a new self. You're building a brain that matches the life you want. Before that life has arrived in the physical, when the inner architecture is built, when the neural patterns and the hormonal chemistry, the energetic coherence of the new self are established, the outer reality must follow, because the outer reality is always a reflection of the inner. So let's talk about time, because one of the greatest obstacles to allowing is our relationship with time. The analytical mind is addicted to timelines. It needs to know when. It becomes anxious when the answer to when is I don't know, it interprets delay as failure, absence as rejection, silence as negative answer, and that anxiety, that impatience is itself the very thing that shows the process. Because impatience is a lack of frequency. It is a signal that says, I don't have it yet, which tells the field to keep producing the experience of not having it yet. Quantum field doesn't operate on your calendar. It operates in what I describe as perfect timing, a time that accounts for variables and factors and interdependencies that your analytical mind could not even begin to map. Something that is destined to arrive in your life may require the prior arrival of other elements, the completion of other cycles, the transformation of other people involved in the story. The field is orchestrating all of that simultaneously, and it cannot do its work if you keep interrupting it with your impatience and your doubts. Every time you say it's not working, it's taking too long, it's not going to happen, you're interrupting the signal. You're injecting the frequency of lack back into the broadcast. You're effectively cancelling the order. What if instead you could develop what I think of as internal patience, grounded in absolute certainty? Not the certainty of knowing when or how, but the certainty of knowing that it's already done. Certainty that comes not from evidence in the external world, but from felt reality in my own body. The certainty that a farmer has when they plant a seed. The farmer doesn't dig a seed up every morning to check on its progress. The farmer doesn't panic when there's no visible growth in the first week. The farmer just trusts the intelligence of the seed. The farmer trusts the process of germination, of root development, of eventual emergence. And the farmer continues to do what is theirs to do. Water, tend, prepare, without any doubt that the crop will come. That is the quality of trust. I'm calling you towards not naive optimism, not denial of current reality, but a deep grounded body-based knowing that you have planted a seed in the quantum field, and that seed is growing invisibly, silently, but with absolute certainty towards its manifestation. Your job is just to keep the soil of your interstate receptive, to keep irrigating it with elevated emotion, to keep the weeds of doubt and fear and impatience and anxiety from taking over, and to remain through it all relaxed, open, allowing and trusting the process with the same certainty with which you trust the sun to rise. Just want to spend a little bit more time now on the relationship between the body and the manifestation, because this is where the work becomes more practical and most powerful. We've talked about brainwaves and neural pathways in the quantum field, and a lot of that is true and important. But the most direct, most immediate, most transformative practice is the one that happens in the body, because the body is the instrument. The body is the tuning fork. The body is where the signal originates and where it's the strongest. And most people, when they try to manifest or maintain an elevated state, they try to do it from the neck up. They try to think that they think their way there. They focus on the mental imagery, the affirmations and visualizations. Those are the valuable, but they're not really incomplete without the body. The body has its own intelligence, its own memory, its own emotional landscape. And that landscape is far more deeply conditioned than the conscious mind. The body has been running programs, patterns of tension, of bracing, of contraction, protection for decades. And those patterns generate their own chemistry, their own frequency, their own signal to the field. If you're visualizing abundance, but your body's running a program of scarcity, tense, contracted, restricted in its breathing, movements, the body's signal will override the mind's intention every time, because the body's broadcasting continuously, not just during your meditation sessions. The body's broadcasting 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And what it broadcasts most of the time is what shapes your reality, most of the time. This is why the physical practice of relaxation is so essential. Not just relaxing the mind, but relaxing the body. Consciously, deliberately, systematically, softening the places where tension lives. Breathing into patterns of contraction and letting them release. Allowing the nervous system to genuinely, physiologically shift into a parasympathetic mode. And then, from that genuinely relaxed body, practicing that elevated emotions, feeling gratitude, not as a mental concept, but as a warm, expanding sensation in the chest. feeling joy not as a forced smile, but as a genuine lightness in the cellular body. Feeling love, not as an idea, but as an actual opening, a broadening, a softening of the entire being. When you practice this, when the mind and the body come into that coherent alignment around the same elevated emotional state, something remarkable happens. Your heart enters a state that researchers at the Heart Math Institute have documented and called cardiac coherence. In cardiac coherence, the heart's electromagnetic field, which is the most powerful electromagnetic field produced by any organ in the body, one that extends several feet outside of it in all directions. This field becomes ordered, coherent, rhythmic, becomes a powerful coherent broadcast. And that coherent broadcast from the heart is, I believe, one of the primary mechanisms by which consciousness interacts with the quantum field. When your heart is broadcasting coherence, when it's broadcasting the electromagnetic signature of an elevated emotion, the field responds. And here is what is so extraordinary about this one. You have the capacity to produce that cardiac coherence right now, in this body, in this moment, regardless of what your external circumstances look like. You don't need the manifestation to arrive before you can feel what you would feel if it had already arrived. You can generate that feeling now deliberately, consciously, through practice. And that generated feeling, that cultivated practice, embodied state of being, is the most direct pathway to the manifestation. You're not working towards feeling as a reward for the manifestation. You're using the feeling as a fuel for the manifestation. The feeling is the frequency is the signal. The signal is what the field responds to. When the signal is strong and coherent and sustained, the field delivers with a speed and a precision that will take your breath away. I've been there, I've felt it, I know it. I can tell you hundreds of stories about what's happened over the last 8 months. But most undeniable, most paradigm shattering are always the ones where someone went deeply into a practice of elevated emotion, relaxation, and allowing truly, when all in, truly committed to the inner transformation rather than the external manipulation, and then watched as physical reality rearrange itself in ways that defied everything they thought they knew about what was possible. People were told they would never walk again. They walked. People were given months to live, not only alive years later, but thriving in ways that their pre-illness selves had never imagined. People who had filed bankruptcy, not once, but multiple times, discovered a financial reality so different from their past that sometimes they genuinely couldn't believe their own bank statements. When you ask them, every single one of them, what changed, the answer is never, I found a better strategy. The answer is always some version of, I stopped fighting, I stopped resisting. I stopped trying to control every detail of how it was going to happen. I decided to trust. I decided to relax into the process. I decided to feel the feelings of the life I wanted, even though my circumstances hadn't changed yet. And then everything changed, every time, without exception. The outer change follows the inner change always, and the inner change is accessible through the relaxed, open, coherent, elevated state always. So what does this mean for you? What does this mean for what you're carrying right now? Stay in this moment as you sit here. It means the most radical act of power available to you is not to push harder. It's to soften, it's to breathe. It is to deliberately, consciously, bodily enter a state of such profound trust and such genuine peace that the intelligence of the field can begin to work through you without obstruction. It means that the permission you have been waiting for, the permission to believe that your impossible dream is possible, that the situation can change, the body can heal, the relationship can be restored, the abundance can arise, that permission is not coming from outside. It never was, it never will be. It's generated from within. In the moment when you decide, genuinely decide with your whole body, not just your intellectual agreement, to stop accepting the story of limitation as the final word in your reality. That's what we're conditioned for. It means that every morning when you wake up, you have a choice. And it's the most important choice you will make all day. The choice of what state to inhabit, the choice of what signal to broadcast, the choice of whether to let the familiar past dictate the future or whether to step into the unknown with an open heart. and a trusting body and a smile and an unshakable conviction that something magnificent is taking shape in the unseen, that the field has received my signal and that the seed has been planted and the invisible process of delivery is already underway. Choose the trust, choose the relaxation, choose the open, allowing expansive state, not because the evidence isn't in yet, because you understand now that the evidence follows a state. You do not attract what you want. You attract what you are. And you can choose right now to be the version of yourself for whom the impossible is not only possible, but expected. Not arrogantly, not demandingly, but with quiet, certain, deeply embodied knowing of someone who has learned to work with the intelligence of the universe rather than against it. This is the great teaching. This is what the mystics meant. Though they used the language of their time, this is what the quantum physicists are discovering through they use the language of theirs. The external world is responsive. Reality is malleable. Consciousness is casual. The most efficient and most powerful, most elegant way to work with these laws is not through force, but through coherence. Not through struggle, but through surrender. Not through anxiety, but through the profound radical transformation practice of relaxing and allowing. You here today, carrying something, I want you to know, I want you to feel in your body as absolute truth. It's not too late. You're not too old. Circumstances are not too entrenched. Your history is not too heavy. The distance between where you are and where you want to be is not a measure of time. It will take to get there. It is simply a measure of the inner work still ahead. And inner work can happen fast. Consciousness can shift in an instant. A single genuine moment of true letting go, a single real surrender, a single heartfelt release of grip can change the trajectory of your life. It's happened to me. I surrendered a long time ago, and then I got conditioned again. And then on Monday, I surrendered again. Now it's Sunday, a week later, and what the universe has delivered me, I couldn't have imagined, asked for, believed, planned, developed. I found being open, expansive, my unlimited unconsciousness has always been beneath the conditioning. And finding that, I found the access to the field. And in finding the access to the field, I found the impossible has been waiting for me all along. It's waiting for you right now. Beneath the noise of your doubt and your fear, and your understanding of me, Mark Tulloch, and thinking that I'm crazy, your practical objections and your very reasonable assessment of how likely a dream is, beneath all of that, in the deep, quiet, spacious reality of what you actually are, the field is responding to your truest signal. And your truest signal, when you peel back all the layers of conditioning and survival, is the signal of the Creator, the signal of the infinite possibility, the signal of someone who belongs here, who matters, who is worthy, who is connected to the very intelligence that orchestrates the stars. You are that. You've always been that. And the moment you relax into it, truly bodily, completely relax into the truth of what you are, the impossible will not just become possible. It will become inedible. Not because you forced it, not because you earned it, not because the universe owed it to you, but because you aligned with it. Because you became the frequency of it. Because you stopped standing in the way of it with your fear and anxiety and your doubt and your need to control the how and the when. Because you finally completely, wholly trusted the process. Trusted the intelligence, trusted yourself, and allowed, in that allowing, in that profound, courageous, deeply practiced, allowing everything you have ever truly wanted and everything you have ever been able to imagine will find its perfect way to you. That is a promise of the quantum field. And that is a promise of your own consciousness. That is a promise that every genuine spiritual tradition has always been pointing toward. Though it's worn 1,000 different faces. So relax, open, trust, allow, even the impossible manifest. I can tell you what, surrendering is not an easy thing to do, but when you do, the things that have happened in the last 7 days, I just can't describe. I couldn't have planned it or asked for anything better. I'm blessed to be here. Conscious systems, clarity mapping. You want some? Come get some. You know where I am.